Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here, New Life Pentecostal Church, Albany, Georgia. I'm just going to share a couple funny stories that happened to me when I was working my way through Bible college. Jackson College of Ministry. I graduated in 2.5 years there with a bachelor's degree in theology. Got there January of 85, graduated in May of 87. It was a good time for JCM. Had David Bernard as my Dean of Theology. Daryl Johns was my Executive Vice President there. Jonathan Urshan taught there. David Reaver was teaching there. Of course, Brother Kraft, Brother Oggs was there part of the time. Brother and Sister, Brother Mallory, Gordon Mallory was there. David Bernard's parents, Brother and Sister Bernard, Loretta Bernard, Sister Bernard, were there. And so it was just a great time for spiritual formation. Of course, Brother Kraft would constantly bring in Jeff Arnold, Billy Cole, and Jim Kilgore, and Chester Wright, and all types of people there. But man, I had to work my way through, work 40 hours a week. I'd go to school. First class was normally 7:50 and work till whenever, go to school till whenever. And then I worked the evening shift at Days Inn from 3 to 11, which was a really good shift to work. And so I'd work 3 to 11. So one time I got a call working at the Days Inn there in Jackson, Mississippi. And so, there was a switchboard, and so I couldn't transfer people. Like, you couldn't direct dial a room. Somebody have to call the front desk. I'd have to say, okay, hold on, and then I'd have to connect them through. And there were reasons for that. And so somebody called, and they said, I'm looking for Jim Masters. Jim Masters, okay. So I punch in, and I think Jim Masters was in room 128, and I accidentally hit 127, room 127. And so I call, and see, there was all these laws about, people were running and, wives getting beaten, all this. So you just couldn't direct. So you'd have to call the room and ask, and say, you've got a call, do you accept, kind of thing. So I punch in the wrong room, and I say, is this the master's room? Is this the master's room? Well, and the guy says, huh? And I've punched in the wrong room. And so I'm beginning to realize something's wrong, and I'm looking down at my computerized display, and I said, is this the master's room? He's like, what? And so I hang up on him, dial the right number, say, hi, is this the Jim Masters room? Yes. And I transfer the guy through. Well, as I'm doing that, room 127 is calling back. They may watch this video sometime, and now you'll know exactly what happened. And the guy says, has somebody called my room? Did somebody dial from the outside and call my room? Well, I could truthfully say no. Because nobody did. I said, no, sir. He said, huh? He said, my phone just rang. He said, he asked, was this the master's room? Like he was my slave or something. I'm like, well, sir, we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen again. Well, mistakes like that happen, it just does. Another time while I was at Bible school, I wasn't raised in church, so I just kind of had to go to church, get what I could, hand-me-down suits and all this. So I got ties from my dad. And so there was a special tie, it had this weird design on it, and I wore it like, every third day to school, probably 3 days a week. I wore this to school. So here I am, I'm a senior in Bible school, and one of the students walks up and says, why have you worn a tie with a burlesque dancer and a roulette wheel on it every day to school? And I said, I haven't done that. He said, yes, you do. You've got it on right now. And I look, and sure enough, there's this girl, and I'm going to a Holiness Pentecostal school, in a short skirt with her leg up like that, and a roulette wheel underneath it. And I was like, I never noticed that. So I go home and I tell Sister Waldron, I'm like, Sister Waldron, did you not? She didn't notice it either. We just thought it was some kind of weird design. And so I went to Bible school wearing this. I'm just like, oh, I'm so ashamed. But just real life happens like that. We had another student there, and he had a job as a security guard. And he got quite the reputation because in those days, they actually, and this is Jackson, Mississippi, they let you carry guns with you as a security guard, as a student. And he was from Canada. And he shot himself right in his seat one time accidentally. Barney Fifed it, he accidentally shot himself. And so even to this day, when he shows up at General Conference and we're all in our 50s, people bring that up to him. It's like the stigma that he can't get rid of. And I remember one time somebody came and wanted a room at the Days Inn, and I said, what's your name? And they said, Ticklin', my dear. And I didn't catch it for quite a while, but Ticklin', my dear. I'm like, well, that was a pretty thing. But one of the neatest people I met was somebody from Jackson, Mississippi that actually wrote jingles. And he would come and he owned a house there on the Ross Barnett Reservoir. And so he began to sing all these popular jingles. And I'm like, you do that? Yeah. He said, I make real good money. I'm just like totally shocked. There was another time my wife and I, we lived, I'm just telling some stories about things that went on at Jackson. And there's some stories I can't tell you. There's just some I can't because it just wouldn't be good. And we lived in a trailer underneath the Ross Barnett Reservoir. And this was an amazing time. And so Sister Waldron, Sandy, she looks out the window. She says, Steve, there's a line of cars leaving out of here. This is in the middle of the night, like 2:30 in the morning. And I'm like, what is it? And she's like, and so there was actually a car driving through the trailer park saying, get out now, evacuate now, mandatory evacuation now. And so we could hear, we're right underneath the dam for the Ross Barnett Reservoir. And we're like, the dam busted. Well, what was funny, Sister Waldron starts throwing stuff on the bed. And I'm like, Sister Waldron, I'm like, Sandy, if the dam busted, we're all toast. This is over. This is bad. This is, we got to get out of here now. So we just get clothes on our back, 45 seconds, and we go running out. And as we walked out the door, ran out the door, the sky is glowing, pulsating, glowing. And so this is mid-80s. First thing we thought, nuclear bomb. Like a nuclear bomb has hit. This is so wild. This is incredible. And so I get out, we get in our cars, and we start asking around. We're like, well, what happened? And really, it was one of these continental gas pipelines that had burst and was shooting flames 200 feet into the air. And that's why we had to get evacuated. And thankfully, I worked at Days Inn and could get a room at any Days Inn for $10, or that particular Days Inn for free, if I'm not mistaken. We didn't have any family or anything in the area. So I was able to do that. But it was Bible college, such a great time. Brother Kraft, awesome visionary. Brother Oggs, Brother Bernard, Brother Johns, Brother Reaver, Brother Bernard's parents. They had such a formative impact on me. And so many others. I'm leaving out Jonathan Urshan. Sidney Poe was there. What a fantastic man of God he was. And I remember one time I was really trying to make highest honor. I forget, magna cum laude, whatever. Sister Waldron always said she graduated, thank the Lord, And I was just trying. And so Brother Bernard's parents had just come back as missionaries to Korea. And, and he had some cute stories. He said, he got up one time and rebuked the guys for playing basketball in their underwear at the gym. And I was like, oh man, I lived off campus, you know, I was married. And I was like, playing back, and what he meant was their undershirts. He called it underwear. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, oh, this is not cool. This is not good. And so, you know, I had like a 91.4 average in Brother Bernard's class, and a 92 was an A, and I needed this to get whatever recognition I was desiring for. I don't even remember now, that I really wanted. And I said, Brother Bernard, this is elder, this is not David Bernard, even though Brother Bernard was always very nice. And we had a great graduating class, you know, Jimmy and Lois Mitchell and Scott Sistrunk. And then right before us was Brent Brosom, and right after us, Scotty Sladen, and just a lot. Eugene Wilson, who's got a doctorate now, and just a lot of different people there at that time. But I went to Elder Brother Bernard, and I said, if I write you, can I do some extra credit, any, for this 1/10 of a point? And he was going to say yes, and then he thought about it. He said, no, what you made's what you made. He said, if I do it for you, I got to do it for everybody. I'm just not going to do it. I said, oh, please, I begged, I pleaded, and he wouldn't do it. So I went and I wrote an 8-page, if I remember correctly, extra credit paper, and I gave it to Elder Brother Bernard. I said, all I'm asking is a couple 1/10 of a point. And he says, I already told you, I was not giving you any extra credit. So I said, may the fleas of Abraham's camels infect your armpits. And I left it at that. And that was just kind of a joke we had. Would you believe, like 20 years later, General Conference, I go up, I said, hey, Brother Bernard. He said, and he was still kind of upset about it. He said, this is the guy that prayed that the fleas of Abraham's camels would infest is what I should have said, infest my armpits. I was like, I was joking. I was a kid. I just got saved. You know, come on, let it go. Sister Waldron and I, we also, before we moved into the trailer, we lived in an apartment complex. And so one night, I'm sitting there with the patio door open, and a wharf rat runs into the patio, into our apartment. And I do, you know, real manly and all this. And it scared the rat so much, it went running out the other side. And I went and slammed the door, keep the rat out. So I had our across the street neighbors, they were there at Wesley Theological Seminary. Now here we are, Pentecostal, they're at Wesley Theological. And so he was like, hi Steve, how are you today? You know, and his wife's name was Angela. I don't remember their names. They may see this video sometime. And if they do, God bless them. Hope they're doing good. And so I was telling, I said, you know, whatever his name was, I said, we had a rat run in our apartment. He said, would you believe, Steve? He said, I had the same thing happen. He said, we had the patio door open, and a rat ran in and ran behind our couch. And he said, I turned to my wife and said, look, Angela, a rat. You know, I do, He turns to his wife and says, look, Angela, a rat. So Sister Waldron and I, that has entered, as you know, if you've been married for any length of time, you have certain things that enter your interpersonal vocabulary. And that phrase has entered our vocabulary to this day. When something will happen, we'll turn to each other and say, look, Angela, a rat. Bible school, nothing like it. Wish JCM was still going. Thank you, Brother Kraft, for having it. God bless. Talk with you later in Jesus' name.